Hi,
Hello,
I'm Julian.
I am Tom.
We are Team Binge. We are here to talk about Silo Season 2, Episode 9, The Safeguard. Tom,
Mm,
you're my safeguard. This was, I'll go first, a pretty strong episode, I felt, from
hmm
a lackluster season of television. That's a strong lackluster. It's actually been what I would describe as fine, but this
Uh-huh.
episode picked up, a lot more happened. Guess what? We spent time with characters that we care about, and so the
Yes.
TV was more compelling. They also decided to bring in more characters that I don't care about, but it was fine. It was fine. Tom, how'd you feel
Uh-huh.
about this one?
No, I loved it. I mean, this got to a lot of stuff from the books that I was hoping they would touch on, with Solo's backstory and these other kids that are in the silo. I thought was really great. And to your point, like once we've gotten so much of Bernard just scheming in Silo 18 that letting him just kind of sit on the sidelines for this episode and just kind of spy on Walker the whole time, I thought was a great service for the show. So allowed us to explore the other characters, get a heck of a lot more Silo 17, which I think this show desperately needed, and it was a fun one. And I loved the ending, the setup for the finale. I think it's thankfully finishing strong.
Sure. I want to point out that Bernard scheming was not what I felt was the weaker part of the other episodes. It was, love stories and just things I didn't care about, but I have
hmm
been vocal about those things. Let's dive into the episode that we did enjoy. This one, Tom, obviously it's the one before the finale, so it is called the Pentultimate episode.
hmm
And now we dive into it. We'll start with Silo 17. And where we landed with Silo 17 is we were finishing up Juliet's, like, I think 14th dive. She was getting certified as, like, a master scuba diver in Silo
hmm
17. She was just
Yeah.
putting those hours in. But when she came to, these Hunger Games kids told her that they'd killed Solo and they cut off all of her air and rope supply, and
hmm
she got shot with an arrow, which healed pretty quickly. I will point
She's
that
great
out.
patch job last episode. Yep.
Just an incredible job.
Uh-huh.
But we find out that we're going to call this the Hunger Gang crew.
Sure.
It's a kid, a baby, and three youngish adults, we'll say.
Yeah. They are hungry. We do establish that they are hungry.
They are. Listen, I'm smart when it comes to me. Smart when it comes to naming things, Tom. You know how I roll.
Yep.
All right, we then get like these flashbacks of them watching Juliet,
hmm
and this reminded me of when like a celebrity does a guest slot on a sitcom, and they're like, "Yeah, I've always been here," and then it's like the show cuts in almost
Uh-huh.
like digitally them into like the background of frames. Like Community did this.
Uh-huh.
This is what it reminded me of, because I'm pretty sure if you went back and watched all those, there would be no indication. Although that's not true. There was some stuff that
There
they
was some, yeah, with like the
telegraphed.
can that gets thrown at her, or again, like some of the camera shots where it like panned back from the balcony was a little bit of the clue. But it would have been, I think it could have been done a little bit better about like the clues of hinting that people were also there and watching.
Oh, I loved it because when she popped up and that water can was there, and I was like, oh, that's pretty convenient that she could just
Yeah.
grab onto that. I like that they had him throwing it out there. I was like, oh, I forgive me, Graham Yost. I never should have doubted you.
Yeah.
But yeah, this leads to, I guess they see her as an intruder. We don't know their
hmm
backstory yet. And so this is very much, as our boy Barrett pointed out, like an others situation in Lost, where immediately when the new people show up, it's weapons time.
Yeah, I like the one, the main Katniss Everdeen of the group says like ready the weapons. And then I think the lady we find out later, her name was Eater. We don't know her real name, I guess, but she's like readying her bat with nails through it. And she's making it more menacing by wrapping a chain around the bat. I would argue the chain is probably overkill. You don't need it when you have nails protruding from the end of a bat, but cool weapon.
Yeah, no, what you should do is wrap that chain around your waist and then attach it to the handle of the baseball and then hula
hmm
hoop. And when you hula hoop with it, the nail bat flies around you like you're
Oh
some
man,
sort of Sonic the Hedgehog creature.
it's like a deadly
Anyways,
skip it.
We the skip it. The deadly. As someone who has a child who frequently uses a skip it will ruin baseboards and hardwood floors in a second. If you added nails, you're killing some people's ankles. That's for sure.
And floorboards.
And floorboards. But, anyways, so we get all these scenes where they're like so much cutting rope, a lot of cutting rope. We have the couple. So I believe his name is Rick. Her name is Audrey. And they get into an argument at one point, and it just, once again, real lack of communication. I just can't shout out enough this show trying to teach us that are in relationships. Communication is key, just like the Titanic, you know?
Yeah, very true. But it's good to establish here that they just want the food. Like, they're going after the vault to be able to get his stash.
Right, because I think this is the argument where do they not kill Solo in this moment, or does that come later? This is, they don't let Juliet drown. That's what it is. She's like, you should have let him drown. I cut the rope. And he was like, well, I didn't want her to die. And it was like, yeah, guys, you need to be on the same page when it comes to murder. You and I have always said that when couples decide to murder, they should do it as a team, just like the good book says. So we have some music playing. And once again, these are all flashbacks, which I was a little bit confused about because later they all pretend like they don't know what music is, but we can talk about that in that moment. They call Solo the killer because they see him talking with Juliet on the bridge. Now, have we established, have they seen him through the glass? I know we get the backstory later, but, or have they just, because he hadn't really left the vault, right?
I don't think he ever did, yeah. So I think that the parents were trying to crack the code. They were the ones writing it. Well, I don't know. I don't know if the parents were writing it on the chalkboard that we get later or these kids were, but they know enough to know that he has food, and they know enough to know their parents went there and their parents did not come back.
Okay. Yeah. This took me a little bit of the smarter person in the room while we were watching had to explain this to me a couple of times because I felt... And also, it was like a parent from each one of these kids. So these kids are essentially step siblings, and they're sleeping awful close in that bunk bed. And this is a podcast.
Well, they have a baby.
No, the baby was was the baby of the parents, is what I was explained to. Are these kids that baby's parents?
She says she's the mom. I don't remember. It's maybe a little bit different in the books, which I don't feel like we need to get into, but I'm with you. I think the whole backstory, they do it a little bit later when Juliet and Nita are kind of talking together, and it's very quick, and I don't know, I didn't need as much of it. I just kind of wanted to get through the story element.
I was under the impression that the curly-head kid and the baby were the parents, and the one with the bow and the arrow, the bat, and the hockey mask were the children, and it was a Benjamin Button type situation where the parents were just getting younger and younger. But
what a twist.
I could be wrong. The most comical moment in a very funny show. This is a comedy, right, Tom? On the Golden Globes or Emmys, this show comes up as a comedy.
It had a laugh track, but they took it out at the last minute.
This with a laugh track would be incredible. Oh, YouTube. I hope someone puts a laugh track under this, because they should put a laugh track in where these kids try to attack Solo, and the show points out this guy cuts everything but Solo with that hatchet. It's just some incredible TV.
It is great. And I feel like I maybe would have, if you really were bent on killing this dude, maybe lead with the bow as the first weapon and then follow it up with the hatchet. I don't know.
Tom, you're a tactical genius. If you can hit him from far away while you're at a safe distance, that also tracks. But if you can run in and you can, I don't know, cut a shoelace, cut a rope, cut an airline, I don't know, cut a paper airplane, cut all these things that don't matter before you murder the person, take your shot there too. Our boy Solo getting arrowed, I found this painful to watch. I like Solo, and I think of him as a 12-year-old man.
Right.
And I did not like him getting shot in the spine. But once again, he seems like he's going to be okay too. So these arrows apparently.
That first shot of the arrow, I'm with you.
Arrows. They
It
got
looks
stuck with non-lethal arrow stuff.
It looks so dead center in his back. I'm like, oh gosh, he's paralyzed, he's dead. But then they showed like the shot again, and it's like more at his shoulder, and they don't do really any sort of triage like we had with Juliet last episode. He's just fine and dandy afterwards.
Yeah, when he hits those drums later on, he probably could have been like, ooh, man,
Yeah.
middle upper back. It's like I pulled a muscle. Do you guys know? And they're like, oh no, we definitely put a lethal arrow into your back, 6 inches. It touched your lungs, my friend. Anyways, felt like a showism, but it's fine. This episode moved quick enough that I'm going to forgive it. They decide instead of murdering Solo, they're going to keep him alive so they can get into the vault for the food, and they're mean to. I guess her name is Eater. We could call her Bangs. It feels so poignant that there's like 5 kids and they've already picked one kid to bully. It's just very like this is like
Classic.
Lord of the Flies, but a much shorter and to the point version. This went from we're gonna murder this guy to like, hey, we got to keep him alive, and it's mainly because if they would have killed Solo here for real, I think I would have been visibly upset.
Yeah, it would have been kind of silly. And I mean, this Katniss Everdeen character, Audrey, like she's going full bore without any sort of plan. Because the plan here is to probably try to capture Solo and not just murder the guy in cold blood. But as we kind of find out later, she has more of a vendetta because it was her family that she believes Solo killed in cold blood.
Right. Which, I guess if you're going to bully, having your parents murdered by suffocation in a refrigerator is probably a good point of origin. I think there's a Batman villain that's why they became evil. I could be wrong.
The Freezer
Man, I believe.
Oh, sorry.
His name was.
I thought it was Freezer.
What was yours?
It's Freezer Man.
There's an ice bad guy in
It's Dr. Freeze.
Oh, yeah. Well, our guy didn't go to 8 years of school, you know.
Yeah.
Ours
What's our
went to
technical
trade
college?
school, you know?
There it is.
Okay. It's late, Tom. Let's move. All right. This leads to the conversation with Juliet, where they're like, "Listen, you get us in the vault, or we'll kill Solo." I didn't really understand the bargain here. All I know is that this lady was like, Audrey was like, "You've got my baby cried, or the baby I have that might not be mine, that might be my parents. The baby's name is Judge, and that baby cries when it needs food. When it cries again, your time is up, and we're killing Solo." I was like, that's quite possibly the most inconsistent and worst timer that you could come up with. That baby could cry for any reason. They're babies, you know?
Yeah, she's had a baby for a while. The assumption is, yeah, babies just cry when they look at themselves.
Yeah. It would have been funny if she had it in the carrier and she, like, turned too quickly, hit the baby's head against that beam, and it started crying. And she's like, your time's up.
Pulls the arrow back again. She was very Bo happy.
Bo happy that's what they should have called her. Audrey Bo happy. We have Eater and Juliet then bonding. This happened, I don't know, relatively quickly. Is Eater in the book, Tom?
These characters are, I don't remember all their names, so when they got introduced, I wasn't really paying too much attention, but I don't remember any of these specific names, but it would be weird to rename them. Okay. But when we get, like, Jimmy later as the name of Solo, like, that is Solo's name in the book.
Okay, good to know that none of these characters are important, so they either die or we leave them very quickly. A little spoiler from Tom's corner.
Not necessarily true. I will say nothing more.
Yeah. Explain. All right. So we have Eater and Juliet becoming fast friends, and by that I mean Eater just wants a friend, and Juliet does not want to talk to any of these kids. She just wants her suit. Eater gets her to commit to that she can go with her when she leaves the silo. I love that Juliet's like, listen, I told you there's only one suit. I just
You gotta hold your breath.
that out. Which I guess was a little bit of telegraphing when we find the second suit, which when she it doesn't count to ask you these questions. When she opened the locker, saw something and closed it, I thought it was, like a catalog that you hid from your parents, but this was I guess a second suit. So
Well, didn't they kind of tease us earlier? And this was when one of those episodes where Juliet was like looking through all this paperwork and trying to chase down like another suit, and then she found a helmet. Was she also kind of potentially chasing down another suit that was in a locker, or did she just get lucky and stumble across this?
I don't know. I just know that when she went through this locker, she did not karate chop it open or
Correct.
people's elbow in order to open the door, Tom. So I've got so many questions about Juliet's detective work, but we won't get into that now.
Listen, we can't all be me, my man.
We can't all be Tom Supersweet. That's very true. Very true. All right. All of a sudden, Juliet and Eater are in, I guess it's that classroom again, or it's Russell's office. They go, all these places just look like dusty and dirty, so I get confused where we're at. But we're looking for a code, and we get Eater monologuing, a good guy monologue this time, where she, they've got the dead parents, they were starving, they went into the vault, yada, 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 they died. Oh, those other kids bully me because all I am to them is another mouth to feed.
Hence the Eater nickname.
Yep, exactly. And I gotta say, Eater, my favorite character in the whole show, Tom.
She seems lovely.
Yes, she does. She does. I am gonna get her haircut. That's for sure. All right. Juliet does not care about this backstory and does not care about Eater. And I wrote in the outline, neither do I, which flies in the face of the opinion I just had where I said she's my favorite character. So we'll just let that one lie. And, oh, by the way, I thought she found the code in this moment. I was going to be so mad at the show, but it's just some sort of other piece of information that I got confused by.
1, 2, 3, 4.
I think those were the numbers on it's like, oh, I found his W2 1 2 3 4. That must be the code. Oh man, this leads to Russell's apartment. Okay, so Russell's a first name or a last name?
Russell is, I think, the first name. He was a leader of IT.
Okay, so Russell's last name is Conroy, and there's a Jimmy Conroy, and it takes us quite a while to connect those last names, Tom. I really like this episode. I do feel like they telegraphed some stuff pretty hard, and then when they gave us the, you're Jimmy, you're his son, and, the show, paused and gave the audience all the time to gasp and, fan themselves, I don't feel like that moment paid off as hard as it, would have if it would have been a true surprise.
Right. They laid it on... No, they did. They laid it on so thick. I mean, not even just here, but in the previous episodes, that I think we went into this episode knowing that he was a young man when he was in this vault. Maybe not specifically Russell's son, which I thought is interesting. But I'm with you. The eventual reveal doesn't really hit quite as hard.
Okay, so you did not know that he was his son, so that's not a bookism?
It might be a bookism. I can't remember. All I do remember is that he was essentially a kid when he first got into the vault, because the book goes wildly back. It does a wild amount of backstory for Solo and kind of how he was in the vault, eventually made it in there, and the things that he had to do to survive. But I couldn't remember the circumstances of how he got in. But him being the son does certainly make sense.
Sure. So there's no point in the book where his dad is shot in the face in front of him through the window, because you'd probably remember that moment in the book, right? Or
I don't remember specifically, but I mean, I know that he experienced quite a bit of trauma in there. Whether his parents were killed right in front of him, I don't remember. I think he got separated from his parents and then just shimmied into the vault. and just kind of presumed that they had died, and he had to defend himself from like other people trying to get in, not necessarily these people's parents. So I think they kind of rewrote that to be able to kind of tie these kids' stories with Solo.
Tom, I don't believe you. I think you're lying right now. I think there's more. I think you're afraid that the safeguardian will happen if you reveal anything. Whenever you're like, oh, I don't remember, I know that you read these books several times. As soon as you finished, you read them again. So I know that you're lying right now.
It's been a minute since I read the book. So yeah, if you're looking for me to be the perfect guy to tell you all the bookisms, you're on the wrong podcast.
Why did I should have done this pod solo. That's what I should have done. You're only here for the books, Tom. Anyways, we do get some sweet chalkboard code breaking. And what I thought was funny is I'm pretty sure she wiped those numbers out before at one point, and now she needs those numbers. And that's just a good reminder to save your work, kids. She is like trying to figure out these numbers, and she's like counting on a map of like the vault. And I was like, wait, what code breaking are we doing here? If you pay attention, it doesn't make any sense. If you don't pay attention and you're just watching the visual and you're watching Rebecca Ferguson be Rebecca Ferguson, it's pretty rad.
Right.
We have a conversation about what a last name is, which Juliet not doing a very good job being a friend to Eater or explaining things. But it is funny to think of kids growing up. I guess if there's only 5 of you, you don't really need last names. From the chalkboard, Juliet tries a couple of codes, and we all know that it's 3 tries, and then it's locked. In this episode, they're like, oh, we're locked out for 24 hours. And I was like, I don't think that's what you said in that one episode. It sounded like if you try 3 times and you get locked out, you're locked out forever. But 24 hours makes more sense. That's fine. She goes and finds Rick. She gets into an argument with him. She's like, listen, I need the code. No one wants to be locked out for 24 hours. Eater's like, let me handle this. Here's some of your dead mom's jewelry. And Rick's like, thank you. I love dead parent jewelry. Let's go talk to Solo. And this is some incredible acting by Steve Zahn and one Rebecca Ferguson. I very much enjoyed this. I think he does an incredible job being Solo. I'm not going to go through his whole emotional journey, but through the eyes of a child, he was trying to like save the silo for his dad. And this is when I believe we get the flashback of when his dad is shot in front of the window, which it's a rough go, you know?
Yeah, it's a brutal flashback, the way they kind of shot it. And yeah, we kind of get now why Solo feels he can't leave or he has to protect it, because he's still in his mind thinks that he has to do this to save the entire silo entire silo, when Juliet kind of eventually tells him like, no, this was your dad trying to save you. He's not telling you that you have to save the silo, because clearly the silo's gone at this point. And I loved this back and forth, and I couldn't agree more. Like the acting and drama was so much better than anything we've seen so far in this season. I thought it was great. And like the whole entire time you've got Audrey there drawing her bow, and slowly both Audrey and Rick start to kind of realize that, yeah, he killed your parents, but he was doing it in self-defense. His parents shot him. And as they're going through this, I kept remembering all these parts in the book and kind of how brutal a lot of these sequences were, where he was, I think he had a rifle or something trying to defend himself. It was brutal to read and brutal to watch in this scene too.
Yeah, it was confusing, I will say, just to understand kind of how they explain it and how they're trying
logistics
to like, bridge the gap of why these kids shouldn't hate Solo. It's like he's been trapped since he was 12. I will say it's an interesting like twist to think he wouldn't open the door to save his dad. His dad died, and now opening the door to like save anyone else, it's almost like, well, I should have just opened it to save my dad at that time. So them shooting him while he's sleeping, I thought that was an interesting move, but they probably shot him with one of those arrows, so he was probably up and he's probably feeling better afterwards. Based on all of the arrow shooting that happens. Suffocating in a refrigerator sounds terrible, and I would not advocate for it. And this all leads to them being like, all right, let's all get along and let's all head over to the vault and get this baby some food. And
Yeah, after all that bit where they do the thing like, oh, he has a baby, and then Solo starts to kind of become a little bit more like receptive and like, oh man, like I got to do something to help these kids. I'm like, immediately think of Step Brothers. Like, man, did we just become best friends? And then boom, go to the vault. They're all great. They're having ice cream. Great times all around.
yeah, no, the vibe of this show definitely very Step Brothers-esque, Tom. Yeah, it's almost like Adam McKay wrote it and it starred John C. Reilly, and I thought Will Ferrell was going to pop in with his curly hair. So yeah, Tom, the vibe of this show and this dramatic thing that happened to Solo with his dad and these kids, I got the same vibe. Mm-hmm. I laughed and laughed. Okay. They get ice cream. I want to know what appliances they have in the silo, that these appliances are like they're past warranty, right? A tech's not coming in there to fix the compressor when that refrigerator goes down. How they keep an ice cream? How much?
I think the idea is,
you know,
Solo's got he's got the iPad in there. He's got all these books, so he can learn how to repair all these things.
Oh, okay. You think he's a certified technician or a non-certified technician? He just knows how it all works.
Yeah, he went to RSI. They trained him for success.
Incredible. And this episode is sponsored by RSI, which is where Tom and I are both going to go because we need the money. Anyways, okay, we already talked about it, but this is where we find out that Juliet found that second suit, and you have a lovely moment here where Solo points out, like, hey, if you had the suit, why did you come back? And you get the sense that she felt a responsibility to save Solo. It wasn't just about getting the suit out of the vault. So they have a nice moment. They have a very friendly pat on the shoulder that I thought said just a lot.
Yeah, it was great. And I just love that it just puts Juliet back in this light where this whole episode you think she's kind of going off and doing it for herself. She just wants to leave the silo, but that's not her. Like, she, especially when she puts it all together and realizes that Solo has been doing this since he's 12 years old all by himself. Like, she's the best. She's a great character.
She is. We see some humanity come back. All right. Speaking of humanity, let's leave Silo 17, Tom, and go over to Silo 18, our favorite silo, the sexiest silo.
It's my 18th favorite silo.
Oh, really? Interesting. Okay. All right. We start with Lucas, still not in the mines, still, away from them, just hanging out. Has the conversation where he's like, there's 50 silos. I found this all out. And Bernard's like, actually, there's 51. And it's like, Bernard, just tell him everything you know. What's going on here? Like,
Yeah.
You're sending him on this wild goose chase. Every time he returns with knowledge, you're like, oh, it's this book, The Wizard of Oz, which it wasn't. I don't know. This terrible communication between these two. Once again, we have a relationship between two people that are not communicating.
And we get all this decoding, and like I kind of said in the last episode, like Reddit had already figured all this stuff out, so everything they were revealing in here, I'd already kind of read. So kudos again to the internet for decoding this. But that's why, like Lucas is saying, the whole 50 silo thing, even though I think we got it earlier, this was part of the translation of the code that he got. Because I think even later it says, we think we were the chosen ones, but we think we were the chosen ones, but we're just one of many. The founders didn't build one silo, they built 50, and they created the safeguard. So that's kind of like the first couple lines of code that he's figured out.
Tom, is the safeguard in the book?
Yes, safeguard is in the book. I don't know if they call it that, but yes, the concept of the safeguard is in the book.
Oh, great. Okay. I don't know what it is, so I'm excited to find out.
Yeah.
They do have the discussion where Lucas is told that Juliet made it to a silo that was no longer working and that she might be alive. That's good for Lucas to know because she is his long-lost love. They almost kissed, we're reminded in this episode. Thank you, show. We have Billings talking about the book with his wife, Kathleen, and she's like, listen, I know you're one of those people that follows the good book like a square, But knowing what's out there, we need to know the truth, and you should stop being such a square and following the pact, and we should be rebels. And she almost said rebel, 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 but she didn't. They just
That would've
love
been great.
looking at Georgia, you know?
Yeah, but I like where she's kind of coming from here. Like at a certain point, and I think Billing's getting this from his wife. Like a lot of characters have told him this already, but now that he's hearing it from his wife that has seen this page, this relic, essentially saying, "Hey, man, you gotta screw the pact at this point. Like we've got a kid, we've got to make sure this silo is still around."
Right. They're communicating like married people should do, so that they are aligned in their rebellion against the silo, which is exactly what our marriage counselor told us. So, all right. Billings is down there with Mechanical. He gives this very sad speech where he's like, listen, I thought they hired me because I was super rad and I was going to be the best sheriff. Turns out they hired me because I'm square and I'm lame, and they knew I would just follow along. And no one argues with him. No one's like, no, man. No, I'm sure it was a little bit of both, you know? They're just like, yeah, you can't help us either, so we don't want you. Poor Bill.
He had a little bit, in the speech, he had a little bit of Sad Sack Perry in him, right? From Outer Range.
Oh, yeah. A lot of sad sack Perry. Yeah. Didn't murder anyone and then throw them into a hole, but a space hole, that is. But yeah, so this is where we see Billings. He's turning towards. Is it the dark side? If they're a rebellion, the rebels in Star Wars are always the bad guys, if I recall.
Yeah, I mean they are in the Down Deep. They do control the lights, and they have turned them off before. So yeah, they're the dark side.
They're the dark side. Okay, because I'm always rooting for the dark side in Star Wars. I don't really understand. People need order. People need rules.
Agreed.
Doesn't make any sense to me why people think they're the bad guys. I think Darth Vader had some pretty good policies. You know? I'm just gonna say it out loud. That's all. But no. All right. Another part of his speech is like, you know, we got to ask questions now, and Knox is like, whoa, before we go too far, let's remind last episode there's a traitor amongst us, and we need to find out who that traitor is. And I was like, okay, thank you, Knox, because I had totally forgotten about Walker and what was going on in there. And so it's very nice of them every once in a while to remind us what happens. And then also Knox is like, oh, also Camille helped us once, and so Camille Sims is going to play a part in this as well. And we're like, okay, thank you once again, Knox, for reminding us all the things we forgot from past episodes.
Did you watch the previously on for this episode?
I never do, Tom. Who's got the time? We're recording at midnight on a Tuesday. Like, come on.
They did so much like heavy lifting about like Juliet going down in the water in that one episode in the first season. All this Walker being the leak or being the mole. Like they did so much of that to kind of help you out, which was fine. But it did kind of like ruin some of these little twists and surprises or callbacks because they called it back so heavy-handed in the opening.
See? Sounds like I made the right choice. I just had Knox explain it all to me in this one conversation, and I was back in. We're also reminded that Patrick Kennedy's still around, still slowly healing from that bullet wound, although it looks pretty good based on, I'm going to say, a week has passed. Through and through gunshot wounds, you recover from them real quick. I guess.
No, they had to pull the bullet out. It wasn't through and through.
Oh, that's true. I mean, that receiver of 49ers, he got shot in the offseason a couple of times, and he was catching touchdowns. So I guess it's possible. That's relevant data for the time. All right. They have it. So Kathleen Billings and Patrick have this conversation, and I think this is just like, this is going to come up maybe in the finale, or maybe I missed it in this episode, but he reminds us that, hey, Juliet like mentioned that the display was a lie, and this is him then reminding us that, oh, when people think the display is a lie, they think outside is okay.
Right.
And that can lead to what happened in Silo 17. So this is a little bit of, whoa, pump the brakes, guys. Maybe test the air before we all run out with that sweet, sweet raggedy flag, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. And it's kind of interesting that we get this because this is kind of an oh moment. Like, if they really do think the air is okay after they potentially win a rebellion, what are they going to do? Because if they try to storm out, we know the outcome is not going to be pleasant.
Yeah. The fun thing about the character that is Patrick Kennedy is he's always like, I know things. I know everything. he never really explains what he knows, but then he always draws like the worst conclusions as to what those things mean. And in this situation, he's going to be the guy that's like, let's go out the top, guys. Juliet made it. Everything's sunshine and birds. And everyone's like, what's sunshine? What's a bird? And he's like, follow me. And they all die. All right. Lucas, he finds out that he needs to go find... I feel like this tunnel has been mentioned several times. I guess it's on the schematics they find on the computer, right?
Mm-hmm. It was what George found in the first season. He found those in the schematics. He was the one telling Juliet about them. And Lucas, I think, also found it when he was decoding the dusty pile of dust that was the hard drive, and found a little like weirdly pixelated tunnel on the bottom of the schematics that he found. So yeah, so he knows about it too.
Yeah, and he and I think he pointed it out to Bernard because Bernard's like, good work. Oh, it must be a tunnel. So once Lucas finds this, he's like, all right, I got to go find Bernard. And then he's running around trying to find Bernard. And comically, no one will help him. Arminson, like, threatens to kill him. And he's like, Bernard doesn't want to be disturbed. Turns out Bernard just really wants to watch Walker all day long. And so this leads to Lucas taking the initiative and going to the down, down deep on his own.
Yeah, and I feel like with so much going on in the silo right now, like for you to just stare at the screen for hours on end and say you can't be disturbed seems like a very odd tactical decision. Because I'm sure he was watching a lot of Walker just meddling with, tinkering with toys, and nothing of important happening.
I don't know, Tom. I don't know, man. Are you watching Silo? Did you know our current world's on fire, you know? And then there's all these things happening in such and such place, the environment, Tom, you know, and then you're watching Silo, so I think sometimes we can be distracted by screens. That's all.
That's fair.
I think there's equality, maybe. I don't know. Is equality the issue? I know it's getting warmer. It's been warm outside. There's no rain, but we're still watching Silo, Tom. So I think
you're right. I apologize.
Is a powerful message that's being told to us through a TV show. As to how we get distracted by the things in the outside world. This episode's been brought to you by global warming. Anyways, brief conversation with Arminson. I think Arminson would agree with what I just said. I think him and I are pretty aligned.
Agreed.
We jackbooted thugs like to hang out together. All right, Walker and Knox are having a conversation. And Bernard is listening to them, and he's Monty Burns, like steepling his fingers, plotting, listening to them plot, finds out that the sheriff is on their side. I wanted this to be misinformation, like that these guys were smart enough to know they were being watched. I wanted that to be the reveal, but that's not the reveal. This is just Walker being a traitor and not informing Knox that the camera's on in her office, which allows Bernard to then slide into her DMs and is like, I need to know the plan. Emoji, smiley face, poop emoji. I don't know. Do you think Bernard has fun when he sends these messages, or is he all business?
I mean, he does remind her that don't leave your room, keep your camera on, or I'm going to murder you, kind of thing, or murder your wife.
Fun. Yeah.
So, yeah.
He does have jokes. I gotcha. Lucas's mom has mentioned that she works in hospice, and he gets threatened by this. He's like, I hope you don't end up in hospice with your mom. What was this? Was this just so the pact, we know that the pact gets handed off? Is this supposed to make us care more about Lucas? He seems like a bad son, if I'm being honest. She didn't know he wasn't in the mines. She said, you were down there for weeks. And he was like, actually, I was only there for one day. Like, what was this, Tom?
I'm with you. I feel like maybe they're introducing her as a character to bring her in for maybe a latter season. and maybe trying to soften up Lucas as a character a bit more. But I think we just needed Lucas to have this conversation with somebody about, and he didn't have anybody else to confide in, to say, like, I lied to Juliet, I didn't have anything, or I didn't do the right thing, I did nothing, and I'm not going to do it this time.
Sure. A lot of stuff to lay on, I don't know. It just felt like, hey, Mom, I'm back from the mines. Oh, by the way, you got to hold on to this, and I'm going to go. And she kind of knows he's going to do something dangerous. She's like, you could never. Even it feels a little bit like silly show writing for her to be like, you were just like this when you were a boy. And I was like, so as a boy, he was constantly running around solving puzzles and trying to save the silo? Like, what? He was constantly not telling you he was back from the mines? What about this was he doing when he was a child? But,
yeah, outside of just being an inquisitive kid, like, that sounds like a great thing for a kid to be.
Yeah. I mean, his nature, Tom, he's just so driven to figure out what's going on here. We get this. I don't need to watch people walk down steps anymore in this show. I know that it's like
you're watching the wrong show, buddy.
It's the whole show, and there's so many more seasons. But him going down and then being like, you can't go down, and him being like, I have to go down, and he's like, I know Juliet Nichols. I was like, show, just get him to the water. Like, I just want to watch more scuba diving. What's going on here?
Well, they kind of do some stuff here, like, it's kind of mentioned like Game of Thrones where they jetpack the characters, where like if they're going to go from one city to another, but it would actually take the character like weeks to actually travel there. It's the same kind of thing with these stairs. Like, he's at level 14, he's trying to get all the way down to like 119, right? Like, that's like a potential full day's journey, but they just make it happen really quick, which I'm perfectly okay with.
They need a slide.
They do need a slide. They had it in the Founders Day or whatever in the first season for the kids.
Tom. There should just be people sliding constantly. I would slide down once and be like, well, I live in the down. I'm not walking back up. These drinkers' knees ain't walking up those stairs. So I'm staying. We have Bernard. So this is him, I guess, showing that he knows what's going on in the rebellion, which then gets back to... I found all this a little bit strange, that this leads to Knox then knowing, like, who the traitor is, just because he briefed these sheriffs. Too much communication in this situation. I do appreciate some of the deputies pushing back and being like, wait, how do we know Billings was the rebel mastermind and that he wanted to blow things up? Those are some great questions. I don't know. Having met Billings, he doesn't seem like a guy that's going to blow things up, you know?
Yeah, I tend to agree. And these two women, I don't know what their characters' names are. We've seen them a handful of times. Like, the one that was working for the sheriff's department is like a right-hand man to Holston, and then one of the other sheriffs. And they keep showing them, which I'm assuming they're going to be the ones that might turn on Bernard or obviously have more sympathy towards Billings because they probably know him better than Bernard does and don't think that he's capable.
I hope they shoot Bernard with a lethal arrow. That's what I hope they do. All right. Lucas and Shirley have a conversation. He's like, I think, handcuffed to the railing. He explains to her, he plays the, as you pointed out, plays the Juliet card.
Yeah,
and,
he traded in his blue card for the Juliet card.
That's exactly right. She might still be alive, and this gets everyone to be like, all right, guy, you can keep walking down the stairs. And
yeah, you're not a spy.
Lucas continues his journey. We have a meeting of the rebellion. So it's Knox, Billing, Hanks, all the masterminds are there, and they're trying to figure out... So later on in this, Knox knows it's Walker, gives some misdirection, and they know Bernard is listening, and he keys Walker in that he knows, right?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, you're jumping ahead a bit, but I don't know what this conversation that they're having, Billings, Knox, and Hank, about, and then Knox finishing it by saying, oh, I know who the traitor is. I couldn't really figure out what the catalyst for that was, but I'm with you. He goes and sees Walker later and says it was Teddy's mom was a traitor, and he makes this comment about like it being the son, and you're going to do anything to protect somebody you love, kind of a speech So, I mean, he doesn't wink to Knox or to Walker, but he might as well have, because I'm with you. I'm assuming he knows and he's trying to now misdirect.
Well, I think so. In the conversation with Knox, Billing, and Hanks, Knox is realizing that this conversation happened in Walker's office. So he realizes then that it's Walker. But
Okay.
then, okay, so we are on the same page that he has this conversation with Walker in front of the camera as a misdirect.
Correct.
And he's letting Walker off the hook because he understands why. Okay. Sometimes
That's my
this
take.
show beats you over the head with things. Sometimes it doesn't beat you hard enough, and it should, but
Sometimes it just shoots you in the back like an arrow.
right, a non-lethal arrow, and you kind of get the point. Exactly. All right. What is happening with Billings and Sims, Tom? Like, so Billings needs Sims' help. I did not understand. It's like Common contractually has to show up for 5 minutes, which I love, but I didn't really understand this. I guess this was all just to lead to the conversation with him and Camille about whose side they're choosing, right?
Well, I mean, Billings passing this relic to Sims, which, I mean, it seems silly that Sims wouldn't have come across a relic like this, and
Yeah,
obviously maybe he hasn't, because this is a very specific relic, right? These are like these red level relics that actually give you information about the outside as opposed to just a Pez dispenser. So this is a revelatory item for Sims when he takes it to his wife. And I like Paul here saying, like, listen, I've got no choice but to trust you. And what we've seen throughout the season, not that Paul knows this, but we've seen Sims and Camille kind of wavering and trying to play both sides. So this was a good play from Billings, and we'll potentially get Sims and Camille to help them out.
Right. Also, talking about that Sims and Camille conversation where they're looking at the page of Georgia, which we've all looked at in National Geographic. I'm sure it's fascinating. He mentions that the rebellion's not going to trust him, but there is something he can provide them, and he has noted that flashing keychain key that has the number 18 on it. And he, once again, reminds us, because that was, I'm pretty sure, a season 1 thing, or maybe it was the beginning of this season, and it's just been so darn long. So this is him, I guess this is leading up to Sims has to get this for the rebellion, correct?
I don't know if it's specific for the rebellion. It's something that if Sims is going to take over leading the silo, he needs to figure out what the secrets and essentially what Bernard knows. Because when he mentions, like, hey, Bernard went there, and when he came back, he says, I need to become mayor now. So Sims knows that Bernard is getting orders somewhere.
Sure. I guess Billings and Sims are the correlation there is they're both very like pact following people. So now I'm starting to realize that maybe he never looked at a red level relic, or like if one is presented to him, he just he's I don't know. I feel like they're kind of similar in that way in terms of their rule followers, and that's where he is getting this push from Camille of like, hey, we need to, in the same way that Kathleen gave Billings the push. There's some parallel between these two couples.
Yeah, I think you're right.
Speaking of two couples that their love is blossoming, don't tell Knox. Lucas and Shirley are headed down to the down deep. We're on our way for this tunnel, and they start talking about Juliet, which, oh man, this is a complicated romantic relationship because this is where Lucas talks about trying to kiss Juliet. They share Juliet was rad stories and how they had wished they had done more to help her, and they're doing some bonding. And then they look down and they see all the water, and he's like, there's a tunnel down there. And they talk about water and pumps, and all I could think this whole time was like, oh, sweet Lord, are we going to get another scuba diving adventure? And I am all for it. Master diver. By the time you watch the end of Silo 2, you are scuba certified. Just, they made that announcement.
That's great. I do like that Lucas is officially going full bore here, where he says, like, I will bet my life for this adventure. It's great.
Sure. Well, and you're not doing that scene justice. She said, are you willing to risk your life? He looks, pauses, looks, pauses, and then says, yes. And it is just incredible. Just So pregnant with the pauses it was. Tom, have you ever climbed a rope before?
Oh, goodness. There's a lot of good rope climbers in the show. I'll just go ahead and say that. It seems very difficult. No knots, no nothing in there. And he just climbs this with all arms.
Someone made a comment that he did not look like he had the upper body strength to handle a rope that long. And my thought would be, I think the down is pretty easy. I don't know, the going down, I think you can handle that. I think if he's climbed back up this, we're in trouble. And we should mention, before he leaves Shirley and he goes down because he's on his own, he drops a little tidbit where he tells her that Juliet was still alive before her camera went out when she went out to clean. And I'm assuming that's going to play in further episodes. We find out it's a good thing what the show should have done is had Lucas been like, I don't need a rope, I'm just going to dive in. And we find out this water is 2 feet deep. And that's how
it was so funny. Like the idea of Juliet doing this in season 1, like climbing all the way down, and then she realizes, oh, I can't swim. I can't just drop into this water when the water was only like 2 feet deep, was kind of funny. And it's funny how like Lucas then starts wading in the water or walking around, and there's drill bits just like resting in the water, being very obvious. Oh yeah, this is not deep water. Like
Right.
the drill bit, how big it is. You can see it just sitting there.
Right. And also this tunnel, not hidden. It's just kind of right
So
there.
open.
So, I don't know. For people that have been coming down to the down deep, as Shirley says, her whole life, maybe they should have, I don't know, looked around with a flashlight a little bit more.
Yeah, agreed.
But
It was funny as Lucas starts walking through the tunnel. My wife's like, "Oh," and he finds 4 little turtles. That'd have been a great twist.
Nice. Tom, I was very surprised when the subtitles called it "The Algorithm Starts to Talk." I did not see this coming, and it almost like took me out of it for a moment. I was like, "Wait, what's going on?"
God?
Yeah, God, is that you? It's me, Margaret. So the algorithm talks, and it's like, hey, I've seen 3 people. Quinn, Meadows, George. Didn't talk to George. Just want to point that out. And they all reached this door. And if you tell anyone about this, we're going to do the safeguard. And Tom, explain. What's happening here? I don't. Explain it to me now. Don't make me watch the finale. Just spoil it all, please.
No, I'm not going to spoil anything. It is interesting because obviously they don't make any sort of mention of the algorithm. So, and I didn't get that. So having the captions on gave you a little bit of a nugget of wisdom, which would be interesting to see what they do if it's an algorithm talking and not an actual person. That's interesting. But the idea of the safeguard, it does sound like he's going to actively, or the voice is going to actively tell him something, right? And it's telling him, hey, you can't tell anybody else. It's not just, hey, don't tell people about the tunnel, but Lucas is going to get some sort of nugget of wisdom. And the question is, do you think we as an audience are going to get what Lucas heard?
No. Tom, do you remember when the show had Patrick Kennedy screaming at us, where he was like, I know everything, and what I'm going to tell you is going to blow your mind, and then he told us nothing? Yeah, that's exactly what the show. Fool me once, shame on this show. Fool me twice, you just can't fool me, So I don't.
It's impossible.
Yeah. I don't know what they're doing. Now I'm concerned because I call it the algorithm, and you don't seem to recognize the algorithm. So this show, based on the distance between the book and the production of the show, AI became a thing. And so this is them wrapping AI into the show somehow, I'll bet. Because it sounds like in your book it was a person. So
I
doing
don't.
some detective work based
I don't know.
your little cookie crumbs that you're dropping. Wink, wink, Tom. I know what you're doing. I see what you're doing over there.
I want to attempt to pull what you're trying to pull out of me apart, but I'm not. I'm just gonna let it sit there.
Wonderful.
I don't think I've spoiled anything.
I don't think you have either. You haven't spoiled anything. You've spoiled everything. Oh, why am I so proud of that? I don't know. All right, now I'm ashamed.
Nailed it.
All right, for those of you that are still listening, once again, we're sorry. You can reach us at teambingepodcast@gmail.com. We love to hear from you. And Tom has the social stuff, Twitter and MySpace and Pure Volume. I think we do something on YouTube now. I think we
finally published our stuff on YouTube.
Guns as we run around. I think is that us? Are we Perfect Dude? I think is what we're called on there.
Man, we should have been. We made the wrong life decisions. But yeah, follow us on the socials.
Yes.
Follow us on the socials. Let us know what you think of the show. Rate and review us if you can be so kind. We'd greatly appreciate it. Got a back catalog of a bunch of other podcasts and shows, so please go check it out. But yeah, fun penultimate. I'm very interested to see what we do at the finale, knowing that we are going to get 2 more seasons. I know this has been a bit of a slog, but I'm glad this one didn't peter out. Like I feel excited now to watch the finale.
Oh, I agree. This was a strong episode. My spirit is renewed. I am refreshed, and I'm ready for the finale. So, for Team Binge, I have been Julian.
And I have been Tom. Till next week, everybody.